Hello again everyone, thank you for joining me. As I hope I indicated in the third of the House Play videos, The Woods is really a game that's about how you use models in combination with each other. It's very unusual that you're going to be able to win a game of The Woods in terms of meeting your objectives, certainly, by simply wading into combat and hoping to win them. This isn't a game where you're powering into combat and you're rolling loads of dice and hoping for sixes. This is a game where you've got to be a little bit clever, a little bit plan ahead, decide what roles your models are going to fulfill on the battlefield. A couple of reasons for this. Firstly, you are tied to decisiveness order. So that means models with high decisiveness are going first. And sometimes that's a benefit, because if you're activating at a point where all of the other models on the table have already had their activations, they're all depleted, they've all used their stamina, you're going to have an advantage over those models. So it is an advantage to go early within the game turn with a high decisiveness, but it also means that you don't then get the opportunity to react to things that are going on later on. So also having a low decisiveness can be, under some circumstances, can be a benefit. But obviously you're tied to that order. So if you've got a high decisiveness, you're always going early. If you've got low decisiveness, you're always going later. So what you need are models that are spread out, that can issue orders to help models activate at different points, and also to help really effective models in terms of what you're about to try and achieve, to have multiple goes. The Woods has the same mechanics as Factious Waste, and I remember a game of Factious Waste that I managed to win by having a model with a shotgun in front of my opponent's gang, and a ring of my own models undercover behind him, just continually giving him orders to shoot every model that was moving from the other side, whilst I had a couple of runners around the pack that were trying to achieve my objective. So positioning models where you can issue orders out of turn in response to things that are going on is a very useful technique. Fate weaving, if you've got the ability to have fate weaving in your warband, fate weaving always targets, or almost always targets, a model or at least an item on the tabletop. So if you need to very quickly throw a stop in your opponent's way, or you need to just give one of your models maybe a little bit of a boost so that it can just win that grapple that turn, so that it can move on and do something important the following turn, that's when it can be important to hit them with a fate weaving action. But you do have to place your fate weavers carefully, because they'll probably have needed to have gathered quite a lot of stamina in order to do that fate weaving, and while they're gathering, they're vulnerable to distraction or to being targeted by your opponents, especially if they have to maintain perception. They have to remain able to perceive the model that they're going to hit with the fate weaver action. So you need to keep them protected as well, and working your shooting models and your grappling models together, so that your shooting models are softening up targets for an attack, or they're breaking up a grapple that's been going on for too long, or you're using a grapple to use up all of a model's stamina, so that when you then hit it with a shooting attack, it doesn't have any stamina remaining, and it's hitting the deck straight away if you need to take models out. It's a quick way of doing it. The actual achieving of objectives is going to be very much tied to your relational actions. They'll be based on interacting with things, or being able to direct actions at particular models. So you need to very carefully consider what your objectives are, and how you're going to achieve that objective. Try and move those models into a position to be able to do that whilst giving them enough support. If you've got a large warband, like a Tuatha warband might have a dozen models in it, you've got the flexibility of different people, as opposed to, let's say, maybe a Spriggan warband, you've got 3 or 4 models there, so you haven't got quite the number of models to be filling the tabletop. So you're going to have to use those in a much more specialist way than if you've got a very broad warband that's able to turn its hand to most things. So there is consideration in choosing your objectives, as well as in deciding what your models are going to do. But you'll have models that are very kind of commandy models, they're obviously going to get used for ordering and for sort of directing other models on the tabletop. You might have some very shooty models, you might have some very grappling models, and when your warband is growing and developing, have a think about what skills you're going to buy them in order to either make them more broadly useful or to specialise them in very specific fields. Also, when you're picking your warband, decide whether you want to go all out in one direction and just keep on the same objective, or whether you want to be able to spread out and have a bit of a broader sense, a bit of a broader feel. Now, some actions that are quite often overlooked are the coercion, and that's because they're a little bit tricky. So basically you've got intimidation and charming. Now, to charm an opponent's model, one of your models that's carrying out the charm action needs to have a higher charisma than your opponent's presence. So you need a very, very charismatic model, because it's not often that wisdom and perception together are significantly higher than strength and wisdom. Strength and wisdom tend to be the more prominent stats there because of the presence, the command range thing that's used. So you have to be very clear. If you want a model to be charismatic, then you're going to have to design them and upskill them specifically to be charismatic. And in order to win that charm offensive, they're going to need to be positioned quite close to your opponent, so they're going to have to get themselves in harm's way. So it's not always easy to carry off. But if you are successful in your charm attempt, then you get to have full control over your opponent's model for one activation. You get to use all of their stamina. So if you are able to get yourself in a situation where you can convince your opponent's model to do what you want them to do, then you have full reign to do whatever you like. Now, intimidation is slightly easier to perform. So intimidation is the one that's based on what your opponent's model can perceive as well as the stats of the model involved. So you have one model that's doing the intimidating, but if you're ganging up on that model, it's going to be much easier to intimidate it. But when you've successfully intimidated, you are a bit limited because you can only pick actions, one action in fact, from the movement or the relational actions table. So you can make them shout out to another model to do something else, or you can make them run away from you, run in a particular direction perhaps, based on the stamina they've got remaining. But you can only choose an action which is has a cost in stamina equal to or less than the amount that you won the intimidate by. So in order to get them to run a really long way away, you've got to really, really intimidate them. So you've got to really gang up on that model. So again, it takes a little bit of maneuvering to get yourself into that circumstance. But if your opponent is getting very close to being able to secure an objective, and maybe it's even an objective that you're sharing, so it's something that you want to grab as well, having a big number of models around and getting a model from your opponent's side that's off on its own, it is going to be much easier to intimidate them and to get them to yield the objective. So that's a way of achieving that. Models that are prone are worth mentioning. So being prone means that essentially you've got to spend all of your stamina in order to get up in the next turn. So if you're not prone and you're away from everything else by yourself, you're in a really stuck position, because while you're on the floor, basically all of your stats are nil. So any attacks on you are going to automatically be devastating. So you need to get up as quickly as possible. And the best way to avoid being prone, causing you massive disadvantage, is to have models that are within their courage range of one another. Because if you're within courage range of somebody who's friendly to you, then it only takes you one stamina to get back up again, and you can have most of the rest of your turn. So keeping models fairly close together so that they can support each other if and when they go down, that's also a really useful thing to keep in mind.